We want to create technology to dramatically improve the world.
To preserve and promote culture online.
To study and be inspired by science.
I'm currently combining medical research and computer science to improve breast cancer diagnostics.
That next generation of smart, powerful women, they're already knocking on the door.
Hey, station, this is Google. How do you hear me?
Soichi, hear you loud and clear, homie.
We try to push these challenging technologies to transform the world and change people's lives.
Now we're in uncharted waters, and what I'm talking about has never really been done before. But that's why we should do it.
Please welcome Darren Pleasance.
Thank you so much. Awesome welcome. You know, it's really cool to be up here. I've sat in those seats quite a few times. I've never been up here before, so thank you guys for that warm welcome. I think I know why you gave me such a warm welcome. I'll give you a little bit of a story before I jump in. I was in Barcelona about a week ago or so, and I was settling in for about a week or so of sitting in windowless rooms and nonstop meetings, and I heard through the grapevine that U2 was in town. And so, of course, I went online and they were sold out, but I started looking around and I managed to find myself a ticket. And so I went there that night, and as you can imagine, if you're sitting in that giant stadium there, the lights are down and the energy is in the crowd, and all of a sudden, energy builds, and then the lights come on and the band's back there playing, and all of a sudden Bono walks out on stage, right? And he's like this. I'm like, wow, and the crowd just goes wild. I'm like, that's the secret, right? You just got to walk out like this, and the crowd goes wild. So I know that's why you guys clap so well, so I appreciate that. The other thing that Bono does, anybody ever been to a YouTube concert? Yeah, there's a few, right? It's one of those, it's awesome, right? One of those life experiences. So one thing he does I found quite interesting is he's, about every 20 minutes or so, he's working up a sweat and stuff, so someone hands him a bottle of water, and he takes a sip, and he pauses. Then he takes another sip, and he sprays it out over the audience, So I'm not Bono. So I was wondering why all these seats were empty down here. I thought maybe you knew, but it was quite an entertaining story and an amazing experience. So let's jump in. I'm looking forward to the next 30 to 45 minutes or so. I want to share with you just some of the things we see at Google, and I've had the opportunity to be involved with there. And I thought I'd divide the conversation today into these three sections. So I just want to talk about the trends. What are the big things that are shaping the world that we live in today and things that impact us on a daily basis? Of course, I want to make it relevant for everybody here in the audience. I'll talk about the implications for businesses and what does that mean for opportunities and some of the challenges we face. And then we'll take some time for Q&A, and as was described at the beginning, Eric will come up here as soon as I'm done, and we'll talk and do a moderated Q&A, and then we'll go ahead and open it up to the broader group. So with that, let's jump in. So the first major theme is about this world of everything is connected, right? And you've got a state now where there's somewhere in the range of 3 billion people accessing the internet and about 5 billion mobile devices, so more than one mobile device per person connected to the internet. Just a couple of years, we're going to scale that up to about 10 billion connected mobile devices, right? That's the same thing that all of us, I'm sure, have in our pocket, and some of you are looking at right now. But man, just in a couple of years, we'll have 10 billion of these out there, basically providing a world where everybody is connected to the internet. And it's not just mobile devices, right? That's one thing, but it's sort of all devices. if you think about this, we're entering a world now where you've got watches that are connected, you've got appliances that are connected, thermostats connected, cars. I know some of you here probably have a Tesla. Tesla's connected. When they do an update, your car downloads, and the next day it drives differently. All the way down to like toothbrushes on the far bottom right here, right? P&G, Oral-B, they basically just released a toothbrush. It's got an app, and you can keep track of how long you spent brushing your teeth. And did your kids spend time brushing their teeth? They said they did. Well, now the app will tell you whether they're telling the truth or not, right? So it's this massive connected world out there. And as you'd expect in a connected world, more and more of these devices are creating massive amounts of data. You got terabytes and terabytes of data being created. So the other major trend that's going on, in addition to connected mobile devices and then connected other devices, is, of course, the whole world of the cloud. And so you've got basically all of this data going up into the cloud, and you've got essentially ubiquitous supercomputing. Right? You've got massive processing power out there that can begin to do things with this data that's unprecedented. And the amount of data is just going to explode. Even I think the number I saw, the 787 Dreamliner, produces about a half a terabyte of data for every flight. So that's a lot of data, right? 500 gigabytes of data for every flight. So you've got a world out there where the data is getting bigger and bigger. You add to it this computing power, and you can start to do really interesting things. Right? We're entering a world now of cognitive computing, where you've got kind of artificial intelligence mixing with machine learning. Those two come together to be able to basically sense, infer, and then ultimately help us make decisions around things that we never could before. The power is just incredible. What it does is it allows a whole new set of experiences that never existed before. And what it really allows us to do is technology moving to the back, in a sense. Technology to date has largely been, we ask for something, it gives us something back. We're moving to a world now where the technology is able to sense where we are, what we're doing, who we are, put it in context, and then infer what would be the most relevant thing to do for us, and deliver that without us even thinking about it. Right? At Google, we talk about, it used to be when you'd go into Google search, you were asking for something, right? So it's kind of an on-demand thing. We're moving to a world now of suggest and assist, where we want the system behind the scenes to be thinking about and observing, and then coming forward with recommendations on what we should do, right? And more of the devices that we work with, the people we interact with, will have that at their disposal. The example here, so self-driving car, massive amount of processing technology in there. You tell it where you want to go, it does all the rest of the work, and it figures out how to get there, and it adapts in a very dynamic world. Right? The Google contact lens on the right-hand side, right? That's one that basically measures glucose levels in your tears. So for diabetics, rather than pricking your finger multiple times a day, which is obviously quite invasive, you've got something that just continuously real-time is sensing what your glucose levels are and making decisions and sending you information via an app on whether you need to take insulin, sugar, what you need to do. So in this case here, the system is behind the scenes helping to give you information that wouldn't otherwise have been available and overall improve the quality of your life. Right? And that's ultimately the goal. Certainly what we're trying to do at Google is take advantage of information and make it available to people in a way that improves their lives. The other thing this does is start to enable some pretty interesting experiences. So this one's a pretty interesting one, maybe not that you're not that aware of it. This is Google Photos, and this is actually just a shot from my computer screen from yesterday. And it's not just a place that stores photos, right? It's not just a database you put your photos in. What this is a database that also has machine learning behind it. And so what it's doing is it's looking at all these pictures, and it's using the basically billions of entries coming into Google Photos every day, and it's using that to infer what it's seeing. So in this case, I just typed in horse. It goes through all my pictures. It knows what a horse looks like, whether the horse is laying down, whether the horse is jumping over a jump like my wife here, or my daughter up there on a cattle drive. It knows what a horse looks like. And what's interesting is in the past, right, we had to tag our photos, right? We'd say who we were and where we were and all that. Never again, right? And at this point, we could jump forward 20 years. I can search back for horses. I can search for things like hugs, right? It'll go out and find any picture of me in a hug. I can go search for smiles. I can search for basically anything you want. And the system is back there learning and improving the ability to track pictures. So from an archiving and tracking perspective, this is a place for massive data and massive machine learning. Is giving us a fairly fun and somewhat helpful improvement in our lives. There's other examples, right? Education is absolutely a part of our world that's ripe for improvement. And this is something recently that Google came out with called Google Cardboard. The whole world of virtual reality is really right on the doorstep of it. It's starting to happen. Facebook bought Oculus a little while ago, and that's a really cool product if you haven't seen Oculus. Google came out almost immediately after with Google Cardboard. I think I've got one. Yeah, so it's this little guy here. It's cheap, doesn't cost a lot. You put your cell phone in here, smartphone, and you can put 3D stuff and basically live in a virtual world. Imagine taking that then to the classroom. And in the past, we'd put you on a school bus and we'd drive you to whatever the local interesting thing is for kids to go do nearby. In this case, you can take them to the Egypt's pyramid. You can take them to Machu Picchu, or the pyramids of Egypt. Take them to Machu Picchu. You can go kind of anywhere in the world. You can go under the ocean. You can go up into space. And it's really a cool experience. It's very immersive. And what we've done now with this is one of those kind of famous Google 20% projects where a bunch of Google engineers in 20% of their time, not part of their formal job, got together and said, how could we use this cardboard thing, which originally was mostly around gaming and you could kind of immerse yourself in more fun. How could we take that and actually apply it in a way that really actually helped people? And so the idea was Google Expeditions, which is just now rolling out. And it's where you go into a classroom and you've got a teacher that has a tablet, and in there you pick the location you want to go to, and the teacher can see what the kids are seeing, except the kids are seeing it in a three-dimensional world. And then the teacher can point to things. So take a look at this pyramid or take a look at this site, and then talk about it. So it's a very immersive educational experience, and it's one that's enabled by this massive explosion in data and processing power that didn't exist before. Perhaps an even more powerful one and more impactful one on virtually all of us is the whole world of Google Translate. Any kind of translation thing, I'll use Google as the example here. But we've now basically built an algorithm where we translated 90 languages. It started off obviously as typing, so many of you have used this. I'm sure you type it in one language and it spits out in the other language. We've got almost 1 billion queries a day for translation going on right now. And then just recently, we released a visual translation. As the picture shows here, you can take your smartphone, point it at virtually anything, anywhere in the world. We've now done this for 26 languages, so we're working our way up to the 90 we're at with typing translation. But you work your way up there, and you can translate or go anywhere in the world and translate what you see. And we're on a verge right now, basically, of a world where there is no more communication barrier, right? Everybody has a phone. We can walk around. Everyone can communicate easily. So this also is enabled by this world of cloud computing, massive data, and massive, basically, processing power that allows us to do this at scale instantly, no matter where you are in the world. So fundamentally transforming how it is we live in this world. So all of that raises some questions, right? So if everyone's got their mobile phone, if all of our devices are connected, we've got massive processing power, we can deliver services and insights at scale in a way that could never be done before, what does that mean for the consumers out there? And on one hand, consumers are the same. We're all people, so consumers are the same. On the other hand, they have changed, and mostly what's changed is their expectations, right? And they've changed in a number of interesting ways. One is instant gratification. So people want what they want when they want it, right? Whether it's going in and getting a question answered, you can go in and type in the search query, you get that immediately. That applies to the physical world too. Whatever product I want it soon. I want it quickly. And it started with Amazon Prime as a great example. I can get what I want the next day, and as all of us know, more and more of those are becoming same-day delivery. I can get it within an hour type of thing. And so there's this increasing level of I should be able to get what I want when I want it. Which then leads to this one, which is this idea of infinite choice. Right? I shouldn't have to choose by what's in stock. I should be able to know what all is out there and then choose whatever's best for me. And I think this is a really cool example up here because this is a Tesco example in a subway station in South Korea. And that's a Tesco supermarket, except that it's just a digital video screen. And as you're waiting for your train, you can go up and do your shopping, just taking pictures of it, and then hit submit, and your grocery order gets delivered to you. If you're Tesco, what a great way to set up a shopping mall, right? It basically just takes some wall space, no actual physical footprint, and it's great for the shopper because it's super convenient and simple. And again, back to unlimited choice, that store can be stocked with whatever it needs to, depending on what time of day or what season it is, for essentially no marginal cost. So really changing how we think about getting stuff available to us. Another one around experts everywhere, right? This is a world where historically an expert was defined typically by some form of training and some level of celebrity. And we're now in a world where expertise is defined more about kind of authenticity and relatedness, right? And you end up in a world where basically experts are available everywhere you look. Anybody know who this is? Michelle Phan? Yep. So Michelle, amazing gal. She started as a teenager, just started creating her own YouTube videos on basically makeup tips, typically for young girls, and all of a sudden her followership started to build. Right now she's got over 7 million subscribers to her YouTube channel, got almost 1 billion views on her videos. Lancome is now sponsoring her, and she's become a global brand. People know who Michelle Phan is. If you're at all into makeup and that whole world of that, she's become incredibly famous. Self-made, right? She used the power of the digital world. And if you're, in this case, a young girl, not so young anymore now, all women many women are watching what Michelle is saying, and so she's built this following and become a source of expertise and a huge source of influence in this particular category. And for every one of Michelle's, there's another 1,000 out there in virtually every category you can think of, building a level of expertise that's easily accessible through the web. So transforming that. And then lastly, this informed and aware, right? This is a world where before anybody goes shopping and makes any kind of decision, they do some homework to figure out what the right answer is. And this world of the internet, of course, makes that quite easy. And whether it's sites like Yelp or Angie's List that provide that, or whether it's some of the experts like I showed on the prior slide, people are making decisions, becoming very informed before they actually show up and buy something. And so the consumers of today are very different than the consumers perhaps of 20 years ago. So that raises a lot of questions, right? If we take it back to this audience, right, which is, what are the implications for business? Right? If we've got a world again of all these devices, connected devices, cloud computing, unlimited processing power, ability to deliver great services, we've got consumers that have all of these expectations. What does this mean for businesses? I think it means a lot, and we'll talk about a bit of this. So one, raises a fundamental question, right? Is our leadership changing fast enough? One of the interesting, I think, dynamics is this idea of digital natives, right? The digital native is someone who has never known the world without the internet, right? And I would argue that most people in this room are probably more like digital migrants, so people who, of course, understand technology, know of technology, but it's kind of like a second language, right? You've kind of had to learn it. You didn't grow up in that world, whereas if you look at anybody who's certainly below 20 years old, maybe even below 25, they've never known the world without the internet. And they're out there taking advantage of it, right? I've just watched my son, amazing how quickly he gravitates to the web and is able to take advantage of all of that information that's out there, right? Just very facile. And this is an interesting example of a gal named Brittany Wegner, who's 17 years old. She won the Google Science Fair about 2 years ago, I guess now. I'll just run a quick video here just to give a sense of the kind of energy and intelligence you've got around this digital native group.
Then when I was 15, my cousin was diagnosed with breast cancer, and I saw firsthand the impact it has on a woman and her family. I decided I wanted to make a difference by trying to make the experience a little bit better for those involved. I was able to teach the computer how to diagnose breast cancer by making it think like the brain to detect patterns far too complex for humans to recognize. This means it can determine if a breast mass is malignant or benign. It's really important because the least invasive test for breast cancer is also the least conclusive. Most doctors refuse to use these biopsies. If they could be used, it could lead to earlier detection and a better process for the patient. I spent hundreds upon hundreds of hours researching for over 2 years, creating a neural network tool for doctors to use when analyzing results. When the application actually diagnosed masses successfully, it was very exciting. It diagnoses over 99% of cancer patients correctly. And since it is deployed as a cloud service, it has the potential to be accessed by any hospital in the world. It has been amazing to see how people, including cancer survivors, are responding to my program and its potential. Cancer touches all of us, and unfortunately, the rates are rising. Helping find the cure to cancer is a real goal of mine, and one day I would love to be working on breakthroughs that can save lives.
So it just provides an example of how, in this case, a young gal, very digital native, able to take advantage of all of this information that's available in the world and turn it into something powerful. I think it raises a question for those of us running businesses is, do we have these kinds of people in our business? Because if we don't, we're already at some form of a disadvantage trying to compete with these kinds of individuals who will go out and they'll be the ones who will be starting businesses in the future. There's another question here around, are we creating this frictionless experience? Again, back to the expectations of today's consumer. they want everything to be easy. They want to be able to interact with you, buy a product, get a problem solved, engage with the customer service individual, have that all stitched together very nicely. Unfortunately, too often today, most companies, those are individual organizations. I've got marketing, I've got sales, I've got support, and in most cases, we expose that organization structure to our customers, and they make it very difficult to get things done. And so the expectations of today's world are very much of the fact that it should actually work very seamlessly. Some companies have done this very well. I think Amazon has done it very well. They've probably set the bar, if you will, for having a great seamless experience. Zappos has done it. I mean, there are a handful of companies that are known for having thought about this customer experience from start to finish, but majority of companies have not. And in a world where these expectations have climbed dramatically, if you're not thinking about this and thinking about how do I think about this, and how do I actually address this end-to-end customer experience in a way that delivers something distinctive, you're at risk of losing the customer to someone who actually does think about those things. Are we reimagining our business? I would argue that virtually every business out there today is ripe for transformation. And for the most part, there's probably businesses or companies out there, startups probably, that are trying to disrupt just about every business out there. And most of these are actually very traditional businesses, started in traditional categories, I guess I'd call it, being disrupted by very non-traditional businesses. So Square in the financial services, you've got certainly Uber in the taxi or transportation services, Airbnb, we all know Airbnb. All of these started with someone asking the question, what if, right? How could I take advantage of all these empty beds that are sitting in homes all over the country? Right? How could I make those available to people? And you'll find that with, again, mobile devices and all this processing power, virtually every industry has got somebody thinking about how could I take advantage of that to disrupt it, right? And we're in a world where a lot of things have changed around competition, right? The cost of distribution have fallen dramatically. The ability to collaborate with people around the world has become very, very simple, right? At Google, we do this all the time. We've got people on calls from many countries all at the same time, and it's low cost, and it's very simple. The ability to access all this supercomputing power I talked to, you can buy that now on basically a per day or even per minute type of basis. So it's now become very low cost to get access to stuff that used to cost millions and millions of dollars. And then for sure, you can build a global brand with far less investment than it used to cost years ago, right? You can take advantage of all these capabilities to build a global brand with much less money than it took in the past. And I'll talk about that in the next section. So this is absolutely a world that is ripe for transformation, and absolutely there are people out there right now thinking about how do I take a traditional business and turn it into something really unique and different. Which of course raises a question, right? So what if I'm not Uber or Airbnb or any of these companies up there, right? I know some of you in the audience and certainly around town here are in the restaurant business or maybe plumbers, electricians. I mean, there's a whole bunch of companies that you might struggle to think about how would you transform that with what I'm talking about. And I'd say, no, you're not out of luck, right? There's still plenty you can do. And what I want to talk about is just good old-fashioned marketing. So if we kind of step back from all of this, how do we change the world and transform businesses? There's just some fundamental first principle stuff around how do I find customers in the business I've got and grow it, right? And there's a lot of really interesting, cool things you can do these days with the power of technology. This is a picture from the living room 50 years ago, right? That's back when there were 3 networks, so it wasn't that hard to reach people. I think the stat I saw was in 1963, there was a TV show with I Love Lucy. It's I Love Lucy. Lucy Goes to the Hospital. It got 72% of American households to tune into that one show. Right? You can't do that anymore, right? The best you can do is maybe today, Sunday Night Football, I think you get around 20% of households to tune in, right? And the other challenge is that's not what the world looks like. This is what the world looks like, right? That's what my house looks like. I'm assuming that's what your house looks like, right? And so not only are they not really paying attention to TV, chances are if they are paying attention to TV, it's because they're streaming Netflix from their laptop or their phone, and they're probably doing Snapchat or something on the side with the other phone, and it's a whole different world, right? And it's different in the sense that it's highly fragmented, so all the eyes that used to be glued on I Love Lucy are now spread across many different screens and devices, all doing very different things. On the other hand, you've now got a means to reach those people in much more targeted ways. So it's both a challenge and an opportunity. The consumers here in this world are absolutely online, right? We see 3 billion searches a day and now 100 hours of video every minute. Right, Matt, that's a huge number. When I joined Google, which wasn't that long ago, about 3.5 years ago, that number was 50. So 3 years ago, it was 50 hours every minute of YouTube video onto YouTube. Now it's 100. So that's a massive amount of information, right? Not all of it's good. Some of it's good, though. Some of it's very good, right? There's a lot of learning to be done out there. So it's amazing how online and participative people are in this digital world. We know they're out there actually learning in a way that shapes their purchase preference, right? So the first one, 70% of smartphone users have used their device while shopping. That's not surprising, right? Most of us, I would assume, do that. We're going to buy something, we typically go online, and we will educate ourselves before walking into the store. It's not just a consumer thing, though. It's absolutely a B2B thing, right? A business will absolutely go online and do research before making a purchase decision. That's actually a really important thing. If you are in a business-to-business type of industry, it doesn't mean all of what I've talked about is irrelevant. In fact, to the contrary, the world of trade shows and trade publications is still there, so I wouldn't say those have gone away, but there's no doubt the world of digital and online has absolutely grown in its importance in influencing, educating business decision makers. And then this last point around just learning, right? You can learn pretty much anything on YouTube, right? And almost anything you can think of, you can go on and find someone who's invested the time to give you a lesson for free. And so it's you've got a world out there where you can actually reach and influence consumers and businesses in a very impactful way, which is why I have a job. Because right now, this is an interesting stat. Less than 10% of businesses in the world today do online marketing. It's interesting. My team has built a database of basically every business in the world. We've got 130 million businesses in our database. And when you look in there, less than 10% of those are doing any form of online marketing. Right? So for me, it's kind of, I've got, say 120 million more businesses to go before I run out of a job. And so it's a pretty interesting business. And you know what? The reason this is happening, though, is not because it's not relevant for them. Most of it has to do with most businesses don't know how to do it. Right? They don't either have a digital native on staff for whom this is just second nature, right? Or they haven't really figured out how I would use digital marketing to grow my business. So I'm going to give you a bit of a tutorial on this. This is just a cool story. This is this guy, Roberto. He basically builds children's furniture, and I'm going to show you a short video on him. And it basically tells the story in his own words of how he took what was a hobby and turned it into a real business. And I'll tell you a bit more about it after the video.
Inspiration has many sources, and I bring a lot of things from my childhood. I like drawing, I like creating things and then seeing them build. That's something I enjoy since I was a kid. My name is Roberto Gil. My business is Casa Kids. When I started doing furniture, I wasn't doing so much of my own designs because before the web, I didn't know how to reach customers. So I was doing work for architects and interior designers, and it wasn't what I wanted to do. AdWords has completely changed my business. Now, people look for children's furniture, and they find me. And if you're smart picking the words, they're gonna find you quicker. When I started using AdWords, the traffic in my website went up like right away and increased sales by more than 30%. That's like 10 extra bunk beds and a lot more kids enjoying our furniture. Now, I work directly with customers, and I'm giving kids rooms that they enjoy, that they love. And I know how to market my products in a way that you can quantify the results. I know the company will keep growing. It wasn't always easy, but it's important to have aspirations and dreams, and the web has made my dream come true. I feel I'm just starting.
So I love the story, and there's thousands of those every day. It's actually what gets me up in the morning. I love the fact that we can help people take an idea, turn what would otherwise perhaps be a hobby into something they can actually make a living at. And you basically, through the power of the web, have access to the whole world. And so it really is a powerful and inspiring capability that's available to everybody, right? I'd be remiss if I didn't highlight this concept of mobile. And what that basically refers to is the fact that if you look at how people are engaging with the web, it's through this type of device now, and much less so the laptop or the desktop. And these are the growth rates here, or this is share basically, so share of digital media consumption. And desktop still a third, so 32%, but you can see the slope down into the right. And consumption on these devices is what's growing at an incredibly fast pace. And so the implications of that are, of course, you want to make sure that when you are engaging with customers, you do it in a way that actually renders well on this type of device. Too many companies have built themselves a website and said, check, got a website, and they move on. And the reality is, unless you've mobile optimized your website, you are not going to be delivering an experience that's at all helpful to you in growing your business. Right? And it starts first, build the website as though it's going to render on this. And most websites now are actually pretty dynamic if you build it in the right way. They can recognize what the device is that they're going to, and it will render itself in a way that shows well. But two, though, you got to figure out what the call to action is, right? What do you want the customer to do, right? If you're in a business that has a physical location, well, you better have a big button when it pops up that says get directions. If you're in a business where you want someone to call and make an appointment, you better have a big button that says call, right? So deciding what it is you want them to do, if it's buy, if it's fill out a form, structure your website in a way that acknowledges the reality that everybody, for the most part, is looking at this. Doesn't mean that the desktop is actually declining. It's actually still growing. It's just growing far slower than mobile. Mobile is exploding. So at Google, everything we talk about is mobile, mobile, mobile. It's all mobile first. Everything we do is centered around the reality that everybody's engaged in mobile. Several formats you can use. We could spend hours on this. I'm going to give you the 1-minute version of this, which is if you're going to do online marketing, there's really 3 main formats of it. Search marketing, so someone types in a product or a category they're interested in. A portion of what comes up are ads related to that category, and Google's job is to make sure that whatever shows up is in fact relevant to the person searching. So, right, we try to really avoid spam. So what people see, they should actually see as being relevant and interesting. The middle one is display. That's basically digital banner ads. So as people cruise around the web looking at various sites, most sites around the world have made part of their real estate available for ads to show up in basically images, sometimes video. And it'll show up basically, and again, if we do our targeting right, it's related to whatever that customer is looking at. So if they're looking at a travel magazine, we would want to be surfacing ads related to travel. And then the last one is video, right? And video is incredibly powerful. It's really engaging. It's exploding in terms of the size. You saw the 100 hours per minute being uploaded. So video's become the really fast-growing and newest type of ad format, right? And making these videos has actually gotten much easier. I'll talk about that in a minute. How many people have seen this YouTube video? There's a few. If you haven't seen it, you should go watch it because it's really cool. Volvo did it for their trucks, right? So this was basically Volvo trying to reach truck buyers, right? Most of us would not be buying those trucks, but they were out trying to reach the audience of people who were buying trucks. And what you've got is 2 large semis. You've got Jean-Claude Van Damme between them, and the 2 trucks start together, and then they back up. And it's intended to show how stable their reverse driving system is. And as you can see, they go further and further apart, and Jean-Claude managed to hang on. So it's a very cool video. You should absolutely watch it. But what's more important is it actually got an amazing amount of engagement. You've got 70 million almost views. You've got 2,300 people commenting. So actually getting in there and taking the time to invest and engage on this. It's one of the things about online video that's so powerful is you can really bring people in, get them to engage, get them to share in a way that you can't do in most other formats. In this case here, for a whole month, right? It was even more popular than the search term sex. So, I mean, how could Volvo have ever expected to get that, right? But they did. And what's cool is you don't have to do this in a way that's, I'll call it traditional. This was a fairly long ad. As you know, most of you have been on, YouTube, and we try to make sure that we're, again, not spamming people. So you all see that skip the video after 5 seconds. So those are ads, but we don't want you to be forced to watch an ad if you don't want to, so you can skip it. But what you see is a lot of innovation now in the industry. In the case, I'll use Geico here as an example. This is a really funny one because they know that lots of people skip, and so they wanted to see if they could combat that reality. So I won't show you the whole video, but I'll show you part of it. I'll let it run for a little bit here. Listen to the first part because it's their attempt to make sure that if you do skip, you at least get the main message.
Don't thank me. Thank the savings.
You can't skip this Geico ad because it's already over. Geico. 15 minutes could save you 15% or more on car insurance.
right, I'm going to make you go watch it, because they've had over 7 million views of that, and people watch it all the way through, right? So, and I'm sure most people would have probably skipped it after the 5 seconds, and instead, because of the way they did it, very creative, they got people watching it all the way through, so good for Geico. You don't have to be a large global brand either, right, to make videos work. This is an example of a guy down in Australia that had a really crummy car, and he wanted to sell it, was having trouble selling it, decided to do something fun with his video. He produced this video himself. It cost a couple $1,000. He's a video developer himself, but it wasn't like a $50,000 commercial. It was very low cost. I'll let you watch the video, then I'll tell you what happened. So, as you would imagine, this thing went viral. He had over 1.5 million views on that video. He set up a website that he started taking basically bids on this thing. He had a Twitter account. He did the whole thing. He ended up selling it for $30,000. It was sold to an insurance company in Australia who then used it for crash testing. And then they created a video. It was like something like, "What happened to my Barina?" And it showed the results of the crash testing. And the guy donated the $30,000 to cancer research. But it just shows the power. If you're creative at all, you don't need a lot of money, and you can get something to go global. A little plug for Chris, where are you? My son's here somewhere. Over on the side. Oh, here he is, right in the middle. So all the videos you guys have seen today that are sponsor videos were done by Chris and his friend Reese. And those don't cost a lot of money, and they're pretty high quality, I think. I'm sure I'm biased, but they're pretty high quality. And the point is, you can actually make really good videos that are pretty powerful ways of influencing people, influencing customers. And there's no reason not to have them, I think, is my point. And Chris has been flat out with his buddy Reese doing videos, and the phone's ringing a lot. So video is a very powerful mechanism. And the final point, and we'll turn to Q&A here, is this concept of launch and iterate, right? I'm using Google Glass, and it's in its next iteration right now, but it applies to more than just physical products. That's a pretty well-known one. But also this world of digital marketing for sure, too. Your first set of marketing campaigns to try to find new customers won't work nearly as well as your 10th one, your 50th one, and so on. The power of this whole digital world is you can launch something, you can measure it really quickly. The scale is typically enormous, so you get lots of information coming back very fast. And then you can tweak it. You can shut off the stuff that's not working. You can add more money to the stuff that is working. And you go around, and you go around. And if you watch the lines of cost per acquisition or whatever your metric is that you're targeting, you see it go up and up and up over time. But the key is to stay engaged, basically, and invest that time to learn and iterate and improve. And the whole world of digital marketing is all about doing exactly that. And when you do that, though, it can be an incredibly important part of your overall marketing budget. Right? We don't assert that TV and print and radio are going away. This should just be a really important part of augmenting what you're doing in a way that reaches, especially this generation, 30 and under, who are in fact spending the majority of their time not on TV, not listening to the radio, but sitting on these mobile devices. So really powerful. I would say this applies even beyond just transforming your business and improving your digital marketing. As I was writing this slide, thought back even just to my own life, right? This whole concept of launch and iterate. I started as a pilot. I thought I'd be an airline pilot for a living, and then that kind of led. My last flying job was into a private equity firm. I hung out with a private equity guy for a long time. He took me all these meetings. I started learning how to become a business analyst and do cash flow statements and business valuation work. And next thing I knew, I was an associate of private equity. Did that, decided to go to business school, which introduced me to management consulting. I discovered this company called McKinsey, got hired, thought I'd do it for 2 years, did it for 15, and then Google called. And so in my whole world, my whole life has been a launch and iterate career path. And so I think there's a lot behind this, and not worrying too much about exactly what's in front of you. Just take that first step and start moving, and then look for opportunities. So with that, I'd like to say thank you, and we'll switch over to questions. Thank you. going to do 2 chairs, I think. And I'll put up one up. There we go. Perfect. Thank you. Thanks.
Thank you, Darren. That was terrific. It was a fascinating peek and perspective on the trends that are and the implications for consumers and the implications for marketing and businesses. Thank you for doing this and taking the time to be here today. Raises all sorts of questions. And if you don't mind, I was going to Google the Volvo ad and find out why it performed better than sex. But I think that, is it possible that the Volvo ad performed so well because people were actually Googling vulva?
Could have been. I had not thought about that. You could be right.
Okay.
You could be right. Smart marketing.
So one of the striking statistics that really shocked me was you said that less than 10% of small businesses have tried online marketing, and which begs the question: does that mean that the other 90% still believe that this internet thing is just a passing fad, or what do you think's behind that?
Yeah, I think it is. I think it's either they don't know about it, right? The number of people that have either not heard of like AdWords. You can do this with Facebook. I don't want to over-promote Google, right? There's lots of places you can do online advertising, and I think there's a lot of companies out there that just don't know how that world works, and they're not in a circle of individuals who do know how to do it. So in a sense, it becomes a self-reinforcing world where they're not aware. Right, and it's basically a gap in both awareness and then also in skills to actually go do it.
Maybe we should talk about that for a second. In terms of skills, what are the specific skills that you think are just essential and either to have in-house or to be able to contract with to really be effective in capitalizing on the potential in mobile marketing?
I think there's several. Definitely website design is a great one to have. Search engine optimization, which is basically making sure that your website shows up when someone searches. Forget about the digital marketing side of it, the search engine marketing, just making sure your website is good and shows up when people search for your product category. Then also the search engine marketing, which is where you then also can pay in order to be ranked in a way that improve the chances of showing up. Knowing how that works, you can get AdWords certified, right? There's free training out there. You can get AdWords certified. Things like Google Analytics are a great tool because measurement's a core part of this. I think, I don't know if Bruce Cleveland's in the room here or not, but Bruce and a group of people put together this thing last summer called Ben Polly, which I think is exactly aimed at the gap in capabilities that we have right now, which is we don't have enough people who really understand this world of digital. And so putting together programs that you're not likely to get in high school or even in most colleges that give you a very tangible skill on how to do what I was showing up here.
Great. Okay, and I got a very serious question. And looking at all the different gadgets out there, is it true that Google engineers are inventing new body parts to strap gadgets onto?
I have not seen that. No, I have not seen
Okay,
that. We do have a robotics group, though, so perhaps.
So when a Google search shows that roughly 86% of the time spent online is in apps. And the kinds of marketing tools that you talked about are search and display and video that are outside of apps usually. So what are the implications of people spending so much of their mobile time in apps for Google, and what is the implication for marketers?
Yeah, so there's no doubt apps have become a very large portion of where people spend time. Facebook's the largest app, but there's lots of apps, right? If you think about Gmail, Google Search, Google Maps, those are all apps, right? And so a lot of us spend our time there. What you find is apps tend to do better for engagement, the amount of sort of focus in using them. The mobile web has much broader reach, so the ability to connect to the rest of the world is much broader in a browser environment. It's also very industry specific. If you look at retail, financial services, travel, those still tend to be categories where the vast majority of engagement is in a browser-based mode, right? In a web-based mode as opposed to an app. In retail, the exception would be Amazon and Walmart, but beyond that, retail, for like the next 29 or so of the largest retailers, it's all predominantly through browser. I think in travel, people seem to want to be able to compare, so being stuck in one app, like a Sheraton app or a Starwoods app or something, tends not to be as valuable to people as a more browser-based experience. So I think the jury's out on how those will play. I think we'll see them in parallel probably for quite a while. I think there's, maybe lastly, the ultimate question is how many apps will someone have on their phone? At some point, there's thousands of apps being produced every day. Most of us use probably in the range of 5 to 10. And so the fact there's 10,000 more apps doesn't mean we're going to add 10,000 more apps to our phone. So it's really about being in that top 10 set of apps.
Right. Okay, that makes sense. One of the things you talked about in your presentation is anticipatory environments, that we live in this age where so many devices are connected. And is it possible that we're in an age where if my Google Nest smoke detector goes off, that Google will offer me an ad for a fire extinguisher and an offer for temporary housing? I mean, maybe you could talk a little bit about anticipatory environments and what does this mean?
I suppose they could offer you the fire extinguisher and have it show up within 5 minutes on one of the drones or something. Then that could work. Who knows where that goes? And I think Google wants to make it so that it's as valuable and easy for you as possible. We're obviously aware of privacy and security concerns too, so we want to make sure that if those kinds of scenarios were in fact possible, that you could opt in or opt out of that type of service. There's a product called Google Now, which I think is super cool, which basically it kind of runs behind in the phone and the Android system, and it basically just it sees your calendar, sees your email, sees all these things, and it uses that to infer what kinds of advice should it be giving you. So if I'm sitting in a meeting, let's say at Google, and my next meeting's in Palo Alto, which is normally 10 minutes away, if there's a traffic accident, Google knows that, because you can see that on Google Maps, of course, and I'll get a little zip on my phone that says you need to leave 10 minutes earlier if you want to make it to your meeting on time. So that's where it's kind of connecting my calendar entries, Google Maps, traffic information, all of those things to give me advice that I would have normally had to go in and search myself. So this whole anticipatory thing is, for me in that case, is very valuable.
It is. It's fascinating. And is it possible that Google is just a massive online spying network? I mean, you mentioned all the privacy issues. How do you navigate that? When do you feel that you're being invasive or just being useful? How do you draw that line?
I think it starts, and we're trying to do as much education as we can around giving people control over what gets shared and what gets used. So a lot of it is in the privacy settings and making sure that people know what they're opting in for. We try to. Oftentimes there are gray lines in there, and so there's no doubt there's lots of conversation at Google around trying to make sure we're on the right side of those lines, and again, giving people the very easy ability. Whenever you download an app, if you ever download an app on the Play Store, it will tell you exactly what data it's collecting and what it's going to use in that app and what it's going to share, and you can say yes or no to it, right? So that's the goal is, on one hand, we want to enable these services because they, in fact, do help the majority of people who enable them, but we also don't want people to be surprised and end up signing up for stuff that they're not comfortable with.
Great, no, that makes sense. And just to make sure that this isn't an advertisement just for Google, maybe you could talk a little bit about some of the other tools and techniques and methods out there that maybe Google isn't involved in that are also, you think, useful and worth paying attention to.
Yep, absolutely. So I mentioned Facebook earlier, and I think Facebook can be a great reach mechanism. It is the app that has the most engagement of any app out there, so people are spending many, many hours every week in Facebook, so it can be an interesting way to reach people. It's oftentimes more of a branding type of engagement, so you're able to put your message in front of people in a way that they might not have otherwise seen, and it's very targeted. Facebook uses audience targeting. They know who you are, oftentimes way more even than Google knows who you are, because they see everything you're doing, they know how old you are, where you are, and they're able to use that audience targeting in a way that delivers stuff that they think that you will find relevant. And both Google and Facebook absolutely are trying to make sure that what gets put in front of you is in fact stuff that you will find useful and relevant, right? It's not a spam effort, it's the holy grail, right? You should actually be excited to get what you see. And so that's the goal for sure. Twitter obviously is out there, and they've had some challenges lately, a new CEO and so on, but they've got still a huge user base, and it can be a very powerful way to get real-time messages out to people. And so I think the jury's out on where Twitter will fit in there, but Twitter, Facebook, Google are certainly three of the big ones. You can do advertising on LinkedIn now, and that's great for reaching certain types of people, you want marketers or CEOs or different types of people. LinkedIn's very powerful. So I think taking advantage of all of these, and depending on your business, figuring out what's the right mix of those to get you the right set of audiences that you are in fact trying to reach.
Yeah, so Gator referred earlier that he's a closet Twitter user, and I'm wondering your thoughts on kind of the future of Twitter as a marketing tool or just as a communication tool, given that it's so limited with the number of characters and the medium. Any thoughts?
Yeah,
on
you know, it's actually taken off more than I thought it would originally. I'm not a huge Twitter user. I do use it, but not that much. So I don't know. I think as formats expand, and mostly it's been texting, but they're working on video and all these other formats. I think that will increase the usefulness of it. I think the key is, I think if you've watched the news, right, the issue is that their user base has plateaued at this point. So for them, it's about how do they make it so that it's more mainstream than it currently is. There's a lot of people who use it, but there's far more people that don't use it. And so I think a lot of the challenges they've got is how do you make it more mainstream so that it's less of the tool of celebrities and news reporters and actually more the tool that all of us use.
I'm looking over at the Google cardboard that you brought, and Google is celebrated and famous for its innovation. You said that came out of one of the 20% time that Google is famous for, and we have an audience here of business owners, entrepreneurs, technologists. What's your advice on things that we should all be aware of, things that we could do to make sure that we have a culture of innovation in our organizations that you've seen at work successfully at Google?
Yeah, I mean, that's probably one of the most interesting parts of joining Google. You get the behind-the-scenes view into how does Google actually keep this innovation engine going, and it is fascinating. It certainly starts top-down. It starts with Larry Page on down, where there's a huge commitment to not wanting to rest on our laurels and basically try to out-innovate ourselves, right? So there's a lot of focus on keeping people focused on doing new things. I think this launch and iterate that I talked about a minute ago is a big one. Let's not spend too much time debating whether the idea is a good one. If we think there's a reasonable justification, let's just go do it, and then we'll figure it out as we go. And the interesting thing is most things do fail, right? As is in the real world, most things fail. And so one of the, I think, the interesting things that Google does, perhaps better than most companies, is shut stuff down. Right? Lots of companies innovate by starting more and more projects. It's the harder decision to take something that was started and you've invested a lot of time and actually shut it down. And to some extent, the conversation within Google is, we don't define failure as having started something and shutting it down. What we define failure as is the time between the time the management team knew that it probably wasn't going to work and should be shut down, and they made the decision to shut it down, right? The longer that is, the bigger the failure. And so I think that's an interesting cultural thing, right? There's no shame in having been part of something that didn't work, right? And because frankly, almost nothing doesn't work 100%. It may not work the way you thought it would, but you pull pieces out of it, like Google Photos that I showed earlier. That was Google Plus, right? And Google Plus never materialized to what we wanted it to, but it had a bunch of interesting components to it with Hangouts and Photos and Stream and other things. Photos is now becoming a massive product of Google's, all because of what some could argue was a failed original product. So.
So the speed of failure and learning is essential. It raises an interesting question for those of us who are running businesses or investing in Oregon. We've all seen this tendency that companies here, startups, tend not to fail very quickly. In Silicon Valley, companies succeed or fail pretty quickly.
Yep.
You're either a rocket ship to the moon or a submarine to the bottom of the ocean, and it's one or the other. And in Oregon, the companies tend to go along more gradually. Do you think that that's a detriment, that we're not failing fast enough and learning fast enough and redeploying those people and the technology to better uses like happens in Silicon Valley?
I don't know, because not every company is going to be a rocket ship, I don't think, right? I think that's a little bit of an artifact of Silicon Valley, and some of it I'm not sure is healthy. So I think it's okay for a slow climb as long as there's clear signals that you are, in fact, on a path to success. I think it's the companies that perhaps, quarter after quarter are met with real metrics that suggest they're not on a successful path, and they don't recognize that and accept the reality. It's those that probably should be put away sooner and move and redeploy that talent. But I wouldn't say that everything needs to be a rocket ship like you see in Silicon Valley, because some of those will be spectacular failures too. They just are a lot more visible when they fail.
Yeah. Okay. Good. And so in a moment we'll turn it over to audience questions. So think of questions to ask Darren. A couple weeks ago, there was this announcement that Google was reorganizing. You have a new parent company name, Alphabet. A cynic might say that this is a strategy to be even more ominous and opaque at Google. What's going on? Are you now an alphabetter and no longer a Googler? What does this mean?
No, so most of you probably heard about that, but we basically created a holding company that's called Alphabet, and Google is a wholly owned subsidiary of Alphabet. It's still the lion's share of the business, and it's certainly the place where all the revenue comes in. What it's really done is it's created more transparency for all the Google businesses. So things like Nest, you mentioned the thermostats and the smoke detectors and cameras and stuff we have there. Google X, which has a self-driving car, and we've got drones and a bunch of other interesting things in Google X. The healthcare business, I showed that contact lens, that sits in a business called Calico. And what it is intended to do is provide a lot more transparency into what Google is spending its money on. So if you're an investor, you can see how much money is being made in the core business, which is the advertising side of it, and then how much money is being spent or dumped into these other businesses. And as an investor, you can then make an informed choice on whether you think those bets are going to pay off. So it's really a transparency move. Essentially has no impact on me because I'm still in the Google part of that framework, so I'm still a Googler. They have talked about, what should people not in Google be called, and so one of the themes from it was character, if you're a part of Alphabet, so we'll see what happens there.
All right, we'll stay tuned on that. Yeah. Let's open it up for questions. We have microphones in the balcony, microphones in the first floor here, and in the men's room. If you have a question, stand up, grab the catch box, and we'll start up over here, please.
So Darren, you showed that wonderful video of Roberto, being able to start by himself and create a business because of a Google search. Isn't that really a little misleading on what's usually happening? Because my experience is that Google search is the unequalizer. It gives, much more preference to the large advertisers, and very quickly it's just a couple of companies that dominate. I mean, Google itself is a great example. You have a 90% market share. That's 25% more than what Putin gets in his elections.
So I think there's a few things in there. So I don't think it's the unequalizer. There's no doubt for certain categories, it is an auction-based system, right? Google doesn't set the pricing on advertising terms. It's an auction. So if you go in and you may find yourself competing against a Walmart or an Amazon for specific keywords. Although it isn't just the highest bidder. There's a great video online if you find yourself inclined by a guy named Hal Varian who explains how Google decides what goes to the top of the search rankings, and it's not just the highest bidder. There's a whole relevance part of it as well. So to the extent you're a small business and you can define your product in a way that is very clearly related to your business, then in fact you will often get ranked higher, even if a Walmart is bidding on that same keyword, but what they're offering really isn't that relevant to what that person is actually looking for. So it's not just a bidding only. So we've got millions of customers. Most of them are not big customers, right? The vast majority of our businesses are what you'd call the long tail. They're all small mom and pop companies, and they continue to spend for a long time because they are getting value. And the nice thing about, to me, digital marketing is you only pay if somebody clicks. And if you set up your website well, you do a better job of converting a click into an actual sale. And so it's, in a sense, a self-reinforcing world where, if you're not making any money, of course you'll drop out, but you have every bit as equal an opportunity to win in that auction as does a Walmart or an Amazon.
I can ask you a little bit about that. So if displays are getting smaller, right, they're fitting in our pockets, we're carrying them with us, and a mobile ad is at the bottom of a page, and is it less likely versus a flat panel screen to be visible? And is there an implication then about how people use mobile ads?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, so that comes back to my mobile point. So as you think about your ads, you want them to be mobile friendly. Basically sites that provide mobile friendly ads and that are mobile enabled are getting higher search rankings with Google than ones that aren't. This is something we announced it's probably 6 or 8 months ago, was because of this massive trend to mobile, we would in fact start to rank companies with mobile web experiences higher than others. And that was purely around user experience, right? There were too many end customers getting web pages that were just shrunken down versions of a large web page, and it was a horrible experience. So we wanted to put some pressure in the market to actually deliver a better end customer experience. And it does have implications then for the kinds of ads you do that should show up and work well in a mobile environment.
Right, and yeah, where they're located on the ad, where they are in the content. Okay, upstairs here, please.
Yeah, no, I think there's always benefits to being part of an ecosystem. I think there's a lot of people in this room who are investing a lot of energy to try to help, for instance, Bend or more broadly the Pacific Northwest, in a sense, create its own version of an ecosystem that helps all of the entrepreneurs in this area grow, right? And you shouldn't have to be in Silicon Valley, for instance, to be able to have some of the successes that you see there. And so I think there is a lot of investment, and it starts from a talent perspective. I mentioned Ben Polly earlier, and those kinds of investments to either grow or attract the talent base in here. Then you have to add in the capital. So that's what this event is all around: the capital, and then regulatory environment and all those things. I think you end up over time building that ecosystem, and I think it is it's a self-reinforcing wheel. The more the ecosystem builds, the more people get attracted here, the more success we see, and the faster that builds. So, and I think in the absence of having it, or at least in the early stages, a lot of it is making some extra investments to connect to adjacent ecosystems. So whether that's Seattle or Silicon Valley, I do think there's value in being connected into those ecosystems to help in the catalyzation, if you will, of this region's ecosystem.
All right, Darren, who has the catch box?
Yeah, right here.
Okay.
So Darren, talk to me about your view, or Google's view right now, on the recent Apple ad blocker with iOS 9 and the war that's starting to take place around mobile ads, Apple blocking those. What's your view in terms of where we're going with ads, and what's the impact for Google there?
Yeah, so ad blockers are definitely coming out, and it does raise questions. It's because the short answer is, who knows? We'll have to see how it plays out. But there's a little bit more of an informed answer than that. It's been interesting to watch the dynamics. Right, just a few weeks ago, the number one ad blocker was pulled from the App Store because the guy who invented it actually was making a ton of money, but all of a sudden got cold feet because he realized what he was in fact also doing was putting at a huge disadvantage all these publishers who in fact make money on the ads that get served. Right? If you've got a site that attracts lots of traffic, you can monetize your site by having these ads shown. There's these ad networks. And if ad blockers pop up, well then those ads basically have much less, maybe even zero monetization value. And so the person that had built that app and was starting to make a lot of money all of a sudden realized it wasn't, there's a whole ecosystem that he was harming in a way that wasn't clearly beneficial. And so we'll have to see, right, whether the industry ends up adopting and liking the fact that you can block all ads. And I suppose ultimately, if that in an extreme world where all ads were blocked, then what you'd find is we'd have to go to a different monetization model. So rather than Gmail being free, and rather than Google Search being free or Facebook being free, you'd have to pay X dollars per year or month subscription service, right? So because all the ad business is just an alternative way to monetize stuff and enable us to deliver services for free. It works pretty well today, and again, if Facebook and Google do a good job, what you're seeing in there is actually relevant and interesting to you, and you have the total choice of saying yes or no. You can click on the ad or not. So I believe in the system, but we'll have to see whether those ad blockers make a material difference. And Google's investing in lots of other stuff besides just ads, so I think a lot of us laugh about the day that we may look back and go, wow, remember when Google was an advertising company? And maybe we'll be a healthcare company or a car company, or who knows. It's an interesting place to be and imagine.
Upstairs in the executive suites. Yes.
So how long till self-driving cars are commonplace? It's not going to be a binary thing, right, where you wake up on a Monday morning and self-driving cars are there. It's one of those things where to some extent they're there already, because if you think about the sensor technology and what's been built into cars now, or you've got, what do they call like the cruise control, where it'll basically set the distance, 3 cars, 5 car lengths, and it'll modulate the speed and the brake to keep that. You've got lane centering stuff, where if you start to go out of the lane, it'll actually move the steering wheel back in. So you're starting now to see more and more components of a self-driving car embedded in existing cars today. And so we're getting closer and closer to a world where it's entirely self-driving. I know in the case of Google, our plan is to start in a community, so we're hoping it'll be Mountain View. We'll see what it's going to be, where we can actually deploy cars in there for moving people around, for delivering pizza, for helping disabled people, blind or otherwise, to get around. And we're going to use that to test and see how well it works. And will people actually be willing to get into a car with no driver? Or will it be one where it's the driver's there, but more or less just there to monitor and make sure everything goes right? So a lot of it comes down to what changes are consumers willing to to entertain. It's interesting if you look at the stats though on cars, like over 1 million people a year are killed driving cars, and the vast majority of those accidents and those deaths are human caused, right? They're human error. And so there's no doubt that a self-driving car would in fact save lives. It doesn't mean we'll get down to 0 accidents, because stuff happens, but if you look on a statistical basis, the sheer number of lives that would be saved if we had a lot more automation would be staggering. And so I think it will happen. Probably over the next few years, we'll start to see more and more of it in the market.
Nice to see that you're hedging your bets, because I saw a reference to horses and airplanes. So
yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Just in case.
Exactly.
Is there a question here?
So I noticed that your last tweet was at Greg Walden to support general aviation. You're obviously very interested there. Curious on your take on drones. There's some people here from our local economic development group, and Ryan Jensen's pitching.
Oh, great. Yeah, so my thoughts on drones. I'd love to connect with you guys, because obviously I love aviation, and I think the future of drones is massive, right? It's kind of taking the whole self-driving car thing, but applying it obviously in an aviation context, and the uses, I think we've just scratched the surfaces, right? We all see it on the news, of course, with the drones over Afghanistan. That's where it all started. But if you think about all the other things, whether it's search and rescue, whether it's agriculture, I mean, there's I would guess, more uses out there for drones than we're thinking of. Right now, obviously, the question is the regulatory environment, and how do you set it up in a way where they can coexist with manned aircraft in a way that meets the needs of both communities, right? I don't think it's an either or. I think we need to find a way for both to exist. And there's been quite a bit of press that I think's blown a lot of things out of proportion, but I'm hoping that sane minds look at this and realize there actually is a very legitimate way for both of these to exist. So my guess is it's actually going to be quite a big industry, and you kind of take all the technologies of avionics and composites and battery technologies and electric motors, and you merge all those things in, and you end up with some pretty interesting use cases that I think would be good for the world ultimately.
No one's mentioned anything about Google Glass, and I found that the Google Glass fits far more comfortably on my face than an open laptop. Is Google Glass coming back?
It will come back. It will come back. Yeah, it's been completely redesigned. I think for us, it's a perfect example of that launch and iterate. It certainly did not do as well in the market, I think, that the team had hoped. On the other hand, they learned a lot, and I think it'll come back more to what are the specific use cases for which it actually is a very value-added kind of feature, right? It's not so valuable for me to be wearing it right now necessarily and being able to see a little clock in my eye and things like that. And it could, maybe the watch will end up being a little bit more valuable, where it vibrates on my arm and tells me I've got 10 minutes to go to my next meeting. But if you think about whether it's surgical environments and doctors in there and being able to real-time either get access to information about patient vital signs, or through the video transmit what they're seeing to other doctors and actually have basically virtual surgical centers, that would be a pretty interesting one. The one example I showed you may have caught in the video of the fire department, they've got the Google Glass and they can get an instant layout of the building, and they can find the way around a burning building without having to be able to see very well. I mean, some of those use cases could be actually quite powerful. And so the team is basically redesigning it in a way that's much more relevant for the use cases where there's the most obvious advantages.
Okay, makes great sense. So since you don't have a clock on your Google Glass right now, it is 12:15 and our time is up. And so please join me in thanking Darren for spending his time with us today. Thank you.
Thank you.